Thank you for attending tonight's webinar, Retirement Readiness. This webinar is being recorded. Please drop any questions you may have to the chat box at the bottom of your screen, or you may also email wellness@iowacounties.org. For pillar participation, a certificate will be uploaded near the end of this presentation. You will want to download that certificate and upload it to your wellness portal. At this time, I am going to turn it over to Scott Nelson with Legacy Financial.
All right, thanks, Molly. My name is Scott Nelson with Legacy Financial Group. I'm happy to be your guide today as we discuss one of our financial education programs, Retirement Readiness. In addition to serving and advising clients for over 30 years, we have the pleasure of partnering with organizations and delivering financial wellness programming throughout Central Iowa. As independent investment advisor representatives, we take great pride in our freedom of thought and fiduciary duty to always work in clients' best interest with confidentiality, true independent, and no product bias. We understand every person's situation is unique, and we really help enjoy helping people, bring that clarity and confidence to their financial future. Today's program is strictly educational. Education is the backbone of our practice, and I really enjoy helping people through these employer-based workshops as well as one-on-one consultations. So retirement, well, retirement, it's really one of the biggest life transitions that we'll all have and hopefully have at some point in the future, a successful retirement. But it's a big transition, and retirement really consists of piecing together really a big puzzle. If you think about it, it's composed of a variety of different resources that we have and hopefully are building today to ensure that we really have enough to live the life we want in retirement. Some of you may be on the cusp of retirement right now. Others, retirement may be a very long ways away for you. But today we'll discuss some of the information that's needed to help clarify really everybody's path towards a successful retirement. We'll discuss some options for deciding when to tap Social Security benefits. We'll also talk about some income strategies and portfolio building strategies. We'll also talk about tax efficient distribution strategies and also retirement readiness planning, what that looks like. We should have some time also for questions and answers. If people want to use the chat box to plug questions in as we go, and we can address them at the end, or feel free to just chime in at the end as well, and we can certainly address questions as we get to those, okay? But again, like I mentioned, retirement is really one of life's major events, and getting it right, it takes planning. Most people just won't luckily be in a position for retirement without intentionally getting there. If you think about retirement can be viewed as, 30 or more years of vacation or unemployment, so to speak. It's really retirement is really the choice to be unemployed, right? But again, getting yourself in a position to have really little or no earned income for possibly 30 years. Part of it, has to also do with, well, what do you want your really financial future to look like? And also, how are you going to finance that? Because really the financial decisions that we're all making today certainly impact our future retirement picture. 10 to 20 years from now, depending on where you're at on this journey, will you look back to today and have regrets, or will you be thankful that you had the foresight to have done some intentional planning? You'll have the comfort and confidence of knowing that you've done what you need to prepare. So one of the things when we look at retirement is looking at an equation, right? Retirement, most of the things you can control around retirement, but there's definitely things that we can't control. We all have control over our spending and our savings, don't we? We all have control over our asset allocation and where we locate assets, okay, and where we invest. We have some control over our employment and how long we'll work. And we also have some control over our longevity. Sometimes people just have genes that we live longer and some don't. but we all have some input in the way we take care of ourselves as well. Some things that are out of our control are market returns. There's nothing that you or I can do directly to make the market go up or make the market go down. Okay. Those things are kind of out of our control. There's a lot of policy out there that's out of our control also around, different taxation policies and saving and benefit policies. So there's some things that are out of our control, but we really need to take a little bit more inventory of the things that we can control. And that is, one of the things is financial planning, right? But financial planning is really more than just investing. It's more about creating a balance in our lives, about paying for yesterday, right? Getting rid of debt, enjoying today, and also saving for the future, saving for tomorrow, saving for retirement. I'm really always amazed at how hard people work for income, for their money, right? And then once they've made it, they don't really always take the proper actions or invest the proper time in taking actions to protect what they've worked so hard for or to grow it. The average financial planning client is about 62 years old. Okay, so it's not really ever too late. However, obviously, the earlier we get started, the sooner we get started, the more impact all of this has. Because really, our retirement planning, it starts now, because tomorrow it's going to happen whether we plan for it or not, isn't it? Hopefully, anyways, right? It's going to happen whether we plan for it or not. And obviously, those who plan for it, they just flat out do better than those who don't plan. Okay, we all will have also a lifetime of financial decisions that we'll all need to be making throughout our lives. And we all start off though, and like when we start off with our first jobs, or right out of college, or right out of school, and start off with our first jobs, a lot of times we really don't do much around retirement planning, because retirement, we know what it is, but it's such a long ways away. And again, a lot of times we don't do anything when we first get started because we don't have any money to do anything with, right? But as life evolves, a lot of times we're saving and we start growing assets, and then we start, or something happens in our lives, right? Something happens in our life, a life event happens, like getting married or having kids, or job changes, or family situation changes, or there's death or inheritance or something like that. There's something, a life event that opens our eyes to our finance a little bit more and gets us to start taking a little more ownership in our financial future. We start doing things ourselves, which is great, like what you're doing today by tuning into some education around your finances. Those are great things to be doing. But at some point, we all, out of all the information out there, again, it's great to be learning on our own, but at some point, we need to figure out all the information that's out there and have somebody, more than likely, there needs to be somebody to kind of help guide us and help us to understand all of the information out there, and really how to make it relevant to our individual financial situations. And so that's what what it looks like to kind of engage in planning as our life, moves on. Because really our financial life is kind of a puzzle, like I mentioned earlier. It's a puzzle that we need to identify all the puzzle pieces in our financial life and figure out how to put them all together, okay, to make our current financial situation work, as well as preparing for the future. And just like every other aspect of our life, right, unless you're specifically trained in that specific area of expertise, then you're not expected to know everything about it. You think about our healthcare, right? I mean, we all should be engaged in our healthcare and learn about our health and how to take care of ourselves, but we're not all physicians. We don't know how to heal and take care of ourselves from a medical standpoint. We go and get expertise to get help with that. So again, it's okay to ask for help, and your financial situation is no different. It definitely takes ownership, and we need to be engaging in it like we're doing today, but don't be afraid to ask for help when you get to that point where the information that we're seeing, we're just not able to discern it and figure out how it applies to our specific situation, okay? So one of the things around planning for our financial future is keeping track, right? How do we know if we're winning? How do we know if we're on pace? How do we know if we're going to be able to retire? Well, we've got to keep track in our financial life. You got to keep score, so to speak, right? And that's tracking your net worth, right? It's a great way to kind of figure out where you're at and also help you identify where you may need to go. And that's looking at, making a list of all our assets and our liabilities, right? And figuring out what our total net worth is. And also figuring out then too, what type of net worth we need to successfully retire as part of that as well. But when we're tracking our net worth, if we're not moving the needle in our financial life, it just means that we're missing something. There's just something we don't know yet. And again, looking to information and resources to help you get there makes a lot of sense, because there's lots of studies out there too that people that actively engaging in planning do over twice as well as people that don't, right? So again, and that again, this can apply to every aspect of our life. I think most people can think about where they are today and somewhere and look back and say, gosh, if I just knew what I knew today about this particular situation, I would do something different, right? So again, getting the help you need to guide yourself to those positions where we've got financial freedom in the future. So when we're looking at the accumulation phase, if everybody on today, I assume is still employed, right? We're still in the accumulation phase. Again, depending on whether retirement's next month or next year or 5 years or 10 years, we've got a little bit of time for accumulation. And part of it, again, is having a plan, right? Having a plan. So this is just kind of a glimpse at a little bit of a portion of financial planning. And retirement plans, have really done a great job of marketing to employees, and they are a great tool. They're one of the number one tools for building our retirement assets. However, they're not the only tool that's out there either, okay? But it's easy to get overwhelmed with all the different types of accounts that are out there. But it helps to think about kind of cascading waterfall buckets when we look at this kind of analogy. First, when we're accumulating, we need to have a emergency fund set up, because if we don't have at least $1,000 or so in emergency fund, if we don't have an emergency fund set up, any plan we start can easily get derailed if we don't have a little bit of emergency buffer set in place, okay? But the first thing that everybody needs to be looking at if their retirement plan has a match or their spouse's plan has a match is at least contributing to get the full match, okay? That's the first thing we all need to do, okay? The next step for most people, majority of people, is looking at paying off high interest rate debt, okay? Because having high interest rate debt, it's like having a hole in your net worth bucket. It's hard to put, when we're putting resources in, they're coming out just as fast on the back or the bottom in the high interest rate side of the world. We need to take care of that. One of the best investments is paying off high interest rate debt. Once we take care of that, we need to look then at, building some tax deferred different types of buckets, which we'll get into a little bit here as well. But if we have a health savings account available through either your employer or your spouse's employer, looking at understanding how to capitalize on a health savings account. A health savings account is one of the only triple tax benefits that are out there for investing for the future. So looking at that if it's available. And if not, looking to the next bucket then, which would be looking at a Roth. And a Roth is, if many of you know, it's investing with after-tax money. So money that we get in our paychecks that hit our bank account that we've already paid taxes on, putting that money in the Roth IRA or the Roth side of a 401k, depending on where we're at with our tax brackets, but hitting that piece. And then after that, once we've kind of topped that off, then go back to the 401k and top off whatever our maximum contributions are there. And then you can move on to like a taxable investment. And now, finally, and again, paying off debt, and this may be a bucket that you take care of earlier in life, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with paying off debt. I'll never argue with somebody paying off debt. But typically, paying off a low interest rate debt like a house or mortgage, and we've seen if anybody's got a mortgage or refinance in the last couple of years, should be around the 2% and 3%. The mindset had always been in the past is make sure we get our house paid for by retirement. And there's nothing wrong with that advice. But that also stemmed from a lot of times when mortgages were 5%, 6%, 7%, 8%. Absolutely, we need to get those taken care of. But from a pure math equation, we think about story problems from 5th grade, right? From a pure math perspective, having something, an investment that earns, say, 5% on average, and having a debt that only is 2% or 3%, from a pure math perspective, it makes sense to invest versus paying off that low interest rate debt. But again, every situation is unique. But the main thing again here is to have a plan. Okay. So again, I talked a little bit about taxes and accumulation as far as different types of accounts. And here's a little chart to kind of help, I guess, visualize that a little bit about when to contribute to a Roth side of the world. And again, the Roth is after tax. Typically, we think about that when our income's, early in our working careers for a lot of folks, but really more so when our income's lower. Okay, when we're lower tax brackets, good to just fund that with after-tax money. And then as our income grows, then we look at, again, like we mentioned before, contributing to the pre-tax side, and then also maybe a little bit to the Roth side. But then as we're later on in life, maybe at the, pre-retirement, 5 or 10 years, and we've got the highest income we've ever had, we need the tax deferral. We need to defer our tax. So we need to go to the traditional side. Okay. And then fast forward to retirement now. So say we've retired, another piece to look at then, and we'll get in it a little bit on the distribution phase, is looking at conversions, getting money out of tax jail, right? Getting out of tax jail if we've deferred when our income's high. Now, when we're retired and our income now is non-existent because we've just retired, well, depending on what our income needs are, possibly getting money out of the pre-tax side of the world through Roth conversions up to a certain tax bracket. Okay, so we'll get in a little bit more in detail, but a little bit on the contribution on the accumulation phase and a different mindset to the distribution phase. But the bigger picture here again is having a plan to build diversification in accounts. That helps us control our tax bracket. Because the other thing about retirement is, fast forward to retirement, and you've got X amount of dollars, saved, say $1 million for sake of discussion. Well, if we've got and it's all pre-tax, and if we've got a 15% federal tax and a 5% state tax, well, that's 20%, right? So really that $1 million is not yours. 20% of that will go to the government, okay? So part of it is, again, understanding diversification through different types of investments to give yourself, again, fast forward to retirement, give yourself control over your tax brackets by having a different, a spigot, so to speak, on different buckets, So if you can control your tax deferred income, and this is the traditional funds are 401k or IRA or pension. Those are typically tax deferred. They're taxable upon distribution. So we can control our brackets a little bit based on how much we spend. Okay. But if we need to, in this scenario, if we've got a married filing jointly and we are spending about $80,000 or $83,000 taxable, and say we're in a year that we need to spend more for a healthcare event or a big expense like a car or a roof or a furnace or something, well, it's nice to have a Roth bucket because that's tax-free to be able to use that bucket for anything above that amount. So it prevents us from spilling over that 22% bracket. So again, a little snapshot into, again, having a plan and understanding the different types of accounts that are out there to minimize our taxation in the future, because I'd love to be wrong. I just don't feel very confident about our future tax brackets 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now being the same, let alone lower. Okay. So again, having the ability to control these makes a big, big difference in successful retirements. I don't know if anybody remembers the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. But remember, from 2017 to 2018, our tax brackets, most of the middle tax brackets, they all lowered about 3%. Okay, so right now our tax brackets are the lowest they've been for a while. Well, that Tax and Jobs Act, it wasn't permanent. It's temporary. It's currently set to expire at the end of 2025, okay? That means in 2026, unless the government, the administration in the future changes and makes these permanent, they'll roll back to the 2017 higher bracket of 3% higher. So as things are written today, our brackets are all going higher, okay? So again, paying attention a little bit about taxes makes a lot of sense, because what you'll hear in 2025, fast forward today's 2025, this year's 2025, and next year being 2026, if nothing's changed, everybody's taxes are going to be higher the next year if we're depending on a flat income, looking at our income. So you're going to hear a lot of Roth at that stage of the game, doing Roth conversions and contributing to Roth as much as you can. Well, and I would agree in 2025 we should do that. However, we should probably have been doing it in 2024, 2023, into 2022, maybe even last year. So those are things to be looking at, again, to help, because one of the biggest things is taxation and inflation in retirement. So we need to have a little better understanding of that. So when we talk about retirement readiness also, we need to figure out, part of it is, well, and a lot of people ask is, well, how much should I have saved? How much should I have? If I'm 50, how much should I have saved so far? Or if I'm 60 or 67, how much should I have saved? Well, and really it's such a individualized answer in all honesty, but here's some generalities that are out there about, basically times your salary, right? If you're 50 and you're making $50,000 a year, well, you should have about 6 times that. Okay, you should have about $300,000 in retirement assets. Okay, so again, no two people really have the exact same retirement plan or strategy or goals. So it's really individualized, but it kind of gives you a little bit of a snapshot of some generalities of where you need to be. Okay. One of the biggest things we all need to kind of figure out is that question of how much do you need, right? This is running some projections. A lot of retirement plan calculators on the retirement plan website. There's some calculators. Most of them have them where you can run some kind of generalities in different scenarios. But we really want to pay attention to the details, okay? Because the details matter. When we talk about very few retirement calculators I see have inflation in there. Okay, now inflation is something that's everybody's hearing about lately because we're all seeing it. Last year, inflation was over 7%, and it's expected, I think last month or this month, even be around 8%, and it should come down. The long-term, Fed inflation goal is to be 2 or 3%, but we're definitely not seeing it right now. Okay, but even with the 3% inflation over the long run, that makes a big impact. And if we don't have inflation built into our calculations, we'll miss the mark almost certainly for retirement. Another thing to look at too is taxes. A lot of the retirement plan calculators don't have taxes in there, right? So we need to consider taxation. Now, most of you and I, probably most of it, well, yeah, you guys are all in Iowa. Everybody's in Iowa, and so I don't know if people realize, but Governor Reynolds has passed a bill where next year, previously, retirement income was exempt for about the first $5,000 or $6,000 of retirement income, meaning pensions, 401ks, IRAs, distributions, pre-tax. Those were exempt, and then for $5,000 or $6,000, and then everything else was a progressive tax system up to about 8.5%. State of Iowa has had a surplus, so they're actually moving over the next couple of years for income tax to a flat tax for earned income. But next year, the way the plan's written and the law's written is next year is retirement income should be exempt. That means there's 0 taxes on retirement income next year moving forward. Okay, so that's helpful for retirement. But again, paying attention to taxes. That doesn't mean our federal taxes are still there. And then also looking at Social Security, and being, I guess, a little more pessimistic. When we're running plan projections, or when you're looking into the future to say, hey, can I confidently retire? it's better to be pessimistic, okay? Again, a lot of 401k calculators will default to a 7 or 8% return. Not to say that that can't happen, but it's a little optimistic. It's better to be pessimistic and say, hey, let's use a 5% return for our investment returns. And for Social Security, although last year Social Security went up, I think 5.9%, well, because it's supposed to go up with cost of living, but let's be pessimistic and maybe have that flat or a 1% increase. Another thing we need to look at too is mortality. Now, if you told me when you're going to die, I could tell you exactly how much you need to retire and how much you'll be able to spend in retirement, but none of us knows that. And again, it's better to be pessimistic and plan for a long life because more than likely, if you live to 90, 95, you're going to want to have some income. You're going to want to have some money, right? So again, be cautious and pay attention to what type of details we're using when we're planning our financial future, okay? And that just helps gives us a little more clarity and confidence around what path we're on. So when we are retired or getting ready for retirement, we need to plan, again, part of putting this puzzle together about where will the retirement income come from, okay? Some people may or may not have a pension, okay, or retirement plan or 401k, IRAs or personal savings, and then we have Social Security. Well, Social Security has really only ever been designed to replace about 40% of somebody's income. So it's not designed to carry the full brunt of retirement. It's only designed to replace 40% of income. So that's a piece we need to look at. And there's a lot of information out there around Social Security. Will it be solvent? Will it last? And it most certainly should. There should really be no reason that we don't have Social Security. There just needs to be a few little changes, little tweaks to Social Security rules that allow it to be funded for all of our lives in the future. But again, you have to have politicians needing to agree on certain things to get these done. But that should absolutely happen. If there's an administration that doesn't allow that to happen, or a particular party that doesn't eventually make these changes, they'll never get voted for again. So there's certainly people that will should be making those changes to make sure that it's something we should be planning for. But again, when we plan for it, we should be very pessimistic. Because really, Social Security should really be looked at to really just cover your basic needs, right? If we can think about Social Security as kind of wake-up money, right? Once we claim Social Security, all we got to do is wake up to get it, right? Wake-up money. So it should really be, they'll be looked at in our retirement picture to cover our basic needs, our food, or basic food, not going out to eat, right? But just our basic food needs, our utilities, right? Our property taxes, keeping a roof over our head, the very basic needs. And then from beyond that, we need to look at our IRAs and our savings and retirement plans to cover more of our discretionary wants, right? And some of our travel. But we also need to kind of figure into this equation too, well, what about future healthcare costs, right? Or a potential long-term care stay? How do we fund those? So we need to have a certain part of our portfolio kind of set aside for the unknowns as well. Again, from a Social Security perspective, like I mentioned, it's only designed to replace about 40% of somebody's income. And the average for that's about $20,000 a year. So $20,000 only goes so far, right? So think about that as really designed to just take care of our basic needs. We can claim Social Security as the rules are currently written, again, as early as 62, okay? But when should we consider claiming Social Security? We should look at that. It's really, again, this is such a unique and individualized situation. We'll talk about some generalities here. But when do you start Social Security benefits? It's going to be different for everybody. Just because a coworker or brother-in-law made a choice on it doesn't mean that's the same. It should be right for you as well. We need to look at one of the number one things is, well, when do you need the money, right? If you're retiring and you need income right away because you don't have other assets to to work off of until you can claim Social Security. Then we need to turn it on right away, obviously. But beyond that, there's a lot of calculations in there too, and there's some kind of break even because, like in this chart here or graph here, you can see that, and as probably most of you know, that the longer you wait and the longer you delay claiming Social Security, the higher the benefit is. But there's kind of a break even. It's around 77 from somebody choosing to claim Social Security at 62 versus waiting to full retirement wage, which for most of you is probably around 67. So waiting 5 years, that break even on that, for the next 5 years, you'll have your Social Security income. But at what point does that break even? It's around 77. Okay. The difference between claiming Social Security at full retirement or 70, that break even is around 81. So again, if you knew you're going to die, you know when to claim Social Security. But again, we should be fairly optimistic we'll live a long time, but also we need to look at, from a portfolio perspective, if we wait to claim Social Security, say from 62 to 70, well, that's 8 years that we need our investment portfolio to produce income to allow us to delay Social Security. So a lot of the information that you see out there, like in this graph here, it doesn't show, if you've got a $500,000 portfolio, how much, even growing at 5%, what that portfolio is going to be returning for you versus claiming your Social Security income earlier. So again, it's something you really need to run the calculation, run some scenarios, and really as you get closer to that, actually being able to claim Social Security, that's when you really need to tighten up and run the number. Ideally, working, right, till full retirement age or whatever, and then claiming Social Security, that's generally what I've seen majority of the time, not every time, but majority of the time, it's when you stop working, claiming Social Security, generally maths out to be appropriate if we have a portfolio that's producing a return as well. But it's got to be invested to producing a return. So again, each calculation is kind of unique, but hopefully it gives you a little insight into Social Security as well. Because the other part, when we look at life expectancy, is just a quick graph here. This is from the Social Security Administration too. Again, being pessimistic, saying we might live a long time, we need to consider that for how to fund our retirement. Also consider for Social Security that, most of us, and this looks at somebody, if you're 65 today, you have a almost 90% chance of living another 20 years, right? And you have about a almost 50% chance of living another 30 years, or at least you or your spouse. So again, longevity is getting there, and life expectancy is getting longer. And that's, again, one of the challenges with Social Security, because when it was designed, years and years ago, people didn't live as long. Okay. So those are some of the things we need to pay a little bit of attention to when we look at Social Security, and then also how long we need to fund retirement. When it comes to our portfolio side of retirement, again, aside from pensions or Social Security, we need to look at some and understand some of the investment concepts around our finances. But when it comes to money, money is tied to emotion, if we think about it, right? For most people, buying something tangible, it's emotional. It makes you feel good when you buy a newer car, or a different car, or you find a shirt that looks good on you, right? I mean, that's an emotional, that makes you feel good, right? Or when you go out to eat and have a good meal, I mean, it's emotional. But when we look at investing, however, we should not be looking at how that feels, because you can't wear a stock certificate, or you can't wear your financial statement, and buying a particular stock or an investment in it might make you feel smart for the time being if it's gone up, but that gets wiped out the moment that investment has a short-term downturn. Okay, so again, from an investment perspective, we really need to look more at math and logic and really take the emotions out of investing. It's hard to do, but that's really some of the concepts we've got to get is making math and logic and not emotional and not listening to all the noise that's on TV, because most of it is noise that's out there when it comes to our investments. Some of the fundamental concepts, one of the fundamental concepts is to get, I guess, our minds wrapped around our investments is the rule of 72. It takes 72 divided by the rate of return. It gives you the number of years that it takes to double your money. Okay, so if we have a stock return, average return in this scenario of 8%, 72 divided by 8 tells us that it's 9 years. So if we're 60, our investment should double in 9 years at an 8% return. Okay, so and then if we look at a bond portfolio or bonds, and right now their bonds are tricky because they're tied to interest rates, and in a falling interest rate environment, bonds do better. In a rising interest rate environment, bonds do worse. Okay, so right now bonds are not easily producing a 4% return, but over the long run they have. Okay, but again, in this scenario, 72 divided by 4 gives us 16 years or 18 years, I'm sorry, to double our investment. Okay, so looking at our investment allocation, when we look at being in a conservative side of the world or cash, and right now there's you really can't find very easily, if at all, a 2% cash. Banks aren't paying anything at the bank. You can find a quote unquote high yield savings account that might pay you 0.5%. But it wasn't just a year and a half, 2 years ago, we had 2% on those high yield accounts. And those will be returning as interest rates right now are increasing and interest rates are rising. But again, when we look at cash, even a 2% return is going to take you 36 years to double your money. That money is just not working for you. And when we have inflation of even at 2%, right? Even a 2% return, or even a 1 or 2% return on cash, which is somewhat risk-free returns, if we have inflation of 7%, we're still losing our purchasing power. You know, the thing about savings accounts, even though you look at a cash in your savings account, is it never really loses money, but they should almost print inflation on the savings statement, and you'll see that you are losing money to our purchasing power. Okay, but having a little bit of an idea of, again, what these accounts are designed to do. Any short-term emergency emergency money has to be in the cash side of the world. Okay, but anything beyond our emergency, anything beyond what we feel we may need in the next 6 months, should look at having it invested in some form or fashion. Most of you have probably seen something like this before too, but laid out kind of a basic set of example portfolios here. And obviously it's a pretty simplistic view, but you look at a more conservative, typically a more conservative portfolio would be more in bonds, less in stocks, okay? And then in a more aggressive, you have more stocks, less bonds. And that's generally been true for a very long time in a falling interest rate environment. But bonds will go down when interest rates go up, okay? So we have to be very cautious around our bond portfolios right now and be shorter in duration, okay? But again, something to look at, again, understanding some of the fundamentals around investing and having our portfolios align with what our goals are for our accounts, right? And if you think about too, looking at, the length of time, I always think about what's the account's job, right? What's the job of your checking account? It's to write checks, right? Or send payments out in the next 30 days or 60 days. So it is liquid. It can't really be invested. A savings account at the bank, well, maybe we got a little bit more than a month or two. We can park some money there, okay? The goal there is to be liquid though. Again, anything beyond, a year or two, it can be invested. But if we have income needs in retirement, we need to be very conservative with the next 4 or 5 years. And if you think about, again, having a portfolio in retirement, that you always want to be 4 or 5 years ahead of yourself in your retirement income needs. So for sake of discussion, if you needed above and beyond Social Security, say you needed $2,000 a month out of your portfolio, well, that's $24,000 a year, right? Well, you're going to want to have, $80 to $100, $120,000 or so in the boring side of the world in your portfolio to ride through the next financial storm, or maybe the current financial storm that we're in. Markets have been very volatile since December, and March of 2020, very volatile. So again, how do you retire? How do you be an investor when you're retired and be able to sleep at night? Well, it's to be in the boring side of the world and be a couple of years ahead of yourself and your income needs. It allows you to ride through times like COVID in March of 2020, because we're not selling into that weakness from our stock portfolio. Or right now, people that are right now in retirement or on the cusp of getting ready for retirement, you should be a couple of years ahead of yourself in the boring side of the world, not cash, but in the short-term bond or some type of fixed income to minimize volatility and allow you to sleep at night with your stock portfolio and be able to ride through the short-term volatility that we're seeing currently, and we'll absolutely see again at some point in the future. Okay, so again, having somewhat of some fundamental concepts around getting your portfolio ready for the next or current financial storm. Okay, because it's really looking at the impact of being out of the market. Again, with money that we need right now, or money that we need in the next couple of years, it shouldn't be in the stock market. It shouldn't be in something that's going to, go up and down so violently and volatile. But over the long run, we need to be in the market. It's more about being in the market than out of the market. You can look at this chart here that looks at, about 20 years, the past 20 years. And again, this is not a guarantee that the same thing is going to happen in the future, but the past data gives us some data to look at for the future. Okay. So had you not been invested, right? Again, now I'm talking about money that we don't need in the next couple of years for income stream. Okay. We need to have that money invested. We can't just be thinking today, oh, well, I wonder what's going on in the market. I think I'll move out. I'm concerned. I'll move everything out to cash. Well, if you look at being fully invested over the last almost 20 years, you would have had approximately a 9.5% return. Okay. Had you missed just 10 days, you'd cut that return in half. Okay. Had you missed the best 30 days in the last of almost 20 years, you'd be almost flat. You'd hardly have any return. And also what's interesting too, is the most of the best days are within about a couple of weeks of the absolute worst days that the market's seen. And you can look back at history to see that. You look at, March 24th of 2020 was a pretty big pullback in the market, but the following month, markets were, up substantially. So again, we've got to stay invested for our longer term money. Shorter term money, we need to not be in something so volatile. Okay. So again, having a little bit of a plan. So having a strategy, again, getting yourself from A to Z. You got to be in the market and we got to be diversified for the long term. But we also need to be on the Z side, not in the market, be in bond ladders or fixed income for our shorter term horizons to ride through market volatility. The other thing is that having an M, you got a plan A and plan Z, but you need a plan M. And that's there's certain funds out there that they're not available in 401k world, but as a retiree, you have options for different types of investments within an IRA that give a little bit more of a defined outcome, give you equity with a buffered downside. It puts a floor below us on our equities that allows us to have that mid and long-term time frame, because again, to stay ahead of inflation, we need to have a little bit of risk in equities, but we don't want our whole neck out on the line when we're in equities for that kind of midterm money. So there's other funds out there to be considering as a retiree. One of the things to look at is, well, what do you do with the retirement plan, right? A 401k or pension or something like that. And you can naturally look to who your current plan is for all the details. And I know they have representatives that can help you with questions specifically on the plans that you own through there. But there's some options out there. A lot of times you can leave it in the plan as far as a 401k or retirement plan. Distributions, you want to look at the mechanics of how that works. A lot of times people can move the money over and do a rollover to an IRA and have a little more flexibility and control, broader investment options. But a lot of it looks at, how we use the money, right? Is it to fund retirement right away? Or is it something maybe you don't need for a while into retirement? Looking at too, when it comes to pensions or annuities, is looking at, is the goal to set up a stream of income that you can't mess up? And that's sometimes not a bad idea. Kind of like Social Security, you can't spend it before you get it, right? So like with annuities, if you have a monthly income stream or pension coming, you can't really overspend it. You can't spend it till it comes next month. Some people, that's helpful to give you that set spending and also the freedom to spend. But sometimes locking up a set stream of income, you lose flexibility when it comes to taxation. You also lose flexibility when it comes to estate planning and leaving money to heirs in the future. So when we look at annuities, and there's a lot of annuities out there, a lot of different kinds to get into, which we won't spend a ton of time on today, but the basic part of annuity is looking at, is it a good deal, right? There's a lot of marketing around annuities, but looking at annuities and really look at how long does it take you to get your money back, right? You look at an annuity or a pension, if it has a lump sum or face value of say $100,000, sometimes the marketing is a 5% withdrawal rate. If people think about it as a 5% return, well, it's not a return, it's a withdrawal rate. That means you get 5% out each year, $5,000 a year. So that's going to mean you over 20 years, $5,000 for 20 years. That means at 20 years, you get your initial purchase back, your $100,000 back. So looking at, is that a good deal? And the rate of return happens after those 20 years. So again, something just to consider. There's definitely places for annuities, but there's cautions around those as well. So when it looks at distribution, again, there's a lot of information that goes in the accumulation phase. I think most people see the information out there around the retirement plan saying, yes, just save 1% more, it makes a big difference. And it absolutely does, okay? And definitely accumulation is almost theoretically pretty easy. You just put more money in, right? That's a good thing to prepare for a financial future. But when it comes to distribution, there's very little information that are teaching people how to do the distribution phase, okay? And not paying attention to the withdrawal options has big tax implications that can really lead to some costly mistakes. I hinted about this a little bit earlier, but it's really, there's an importance of understanding the order of investment distributions, okay? So especially if we've spent some time on the accumulation phase of building different types of accounts like Roth accounts and that are tax-free distributions, and pre-tax that are tax when we take the money out, in an HSA account. Understanding having some different, and also just having a taxable account that is only subject to gains versus income. So the main thing is looking at is the timing of the distributions, right? Is to withdraw from an IRA when our tax brackets are lower, right? And to also put in the Roth side when our brackets are lower. So looking at this phase, so getting to retirement, right? And looking at a tax bracket, if right now we're on the cusp of retirement, our income's the highest it's been, and we're in the highest brackets we have ever been, and in the next couple of years or next year or next couple of years, we're going into retirement, our earned income drops, okay? So that gives us a chance to look at doing what's called a Roth conversion, which looks at getting money out of tax jail up to a certain bracket, okay? So again, in this scenario here, you've got a couple filing jointly. Maybe they only need $60,000 out of their 401k pre-tax side of the world. They only need $60,000. Well, we could look at doing what's called a Roth conversion, where getting, say another $20,000 out of tax jail, right, up to the top of our bracket. So we're getting money out at an own 12% today, and doing a conversion and putting in the Roth side of the world. So we're paying taxes today at an own 12% because we're not very optimistic about the future taxes being lower. And so again, using some of these strategies to fill these buckets up, even in retirement, make a lot of sense, because then it allows you more future flexibility. The other thing, and we don't always like to think about this, but the reality is that nobody makes it out of this alive, right? And in a married couple, in the future, we may have somebody that's a widow, right, or widower. And in that case, right, so now we automatically go from a married bracket of up to $83,000 to a single bracket of only $40,000. Okay, beyond $40,000, you're bumped into that next higher bracket, a 10% higher bracket. So doing some Roth conversions also help to set our spouses up for not being taxed so severely as well. So again, looking at and understanding a little bit around taxes really helps in retirement. Some of the retirement realities as we're kind of wrapping up here too, that we need to think about, and a lot of people have this fear. It's the fear of running out of money. Almost 60% of people fear running out of money more than dying. Okay. And I get a look in the future every day too, and see people that have planned well and planned early and often, and people that got caught off guard. Life threw them a curveball. They weren't able to work as long as they want, to save as much as they want, or had a medical situation and had to retire early or something. They weren't able to accumulate the assets before retiring as much as they wanted to. And I see clients that have the fear of running out of money because they didn't have a chance to save as much. And that's not a retirement I would wish on anybody, is fearing running out of money. But in all reality, again, we got to look at, even an average, over 65 household, spends about almost $57,000 today in retirement. Well, most of us want a long retirement, right? 20 years from now, with a 3% inflation, we'll need almost $100,000 of today's equivalent of today's income. To get that $57,000 of today's income, we'll need $100,000 to have that same purchasing power that we have today. So again, we've got to be looking at making sure we're running some projections that includes inflation, so we don't end up being in that fear of running out of assets either. So again, there's a lot of resources that are out there, and a lot of employees out there too. A lot of people want advice and information. There are people out there that are resourceful. They don't need help. They've got it handled, and that's awesome. They love doing this, right? There's a lot of people out there that are wired for numbers and calculations and finances, and that's great. There's some people out there, there's a lot of people out there that get it, right? They understand the importance, but they just want somebody to help validate the decisions that they're making, to make sure that they can confidently make decisions around their financial future. Okay. And then there's some people out there too, about a third of people, that just want to be told, hey, this stuff makes me nauseous, right? It's like, I don't want to know about all the numbers. I want somebody to, do it for me, right? And that's fine too. But the point is that there's a lot of information. As you all know, you can Google about anything. You could Google, should I contribute to a Roth or traditional? Well, and you can find a lot of articles that say confidently one way, a lot of articles that say confidently the other way. The key is to understand the information out there and making it relevant to our own specific situation. That's when changes happen, okay? But definitely utilize whoever your current retirement plan provider. Majority of them are underutilized. I mean, there's a number to call or a resource to go to ask those questions that we all should be asking if we're not confident in our allocation, or if we're not confident in how much we're saving. Absolutely utilize those resources. We're available also as a resource in a virtual one-on-one consultation, or if you're in the Des Moines Metro, happy to meet in person too. Happy to be a resource for you folks as well. Again, by doing a consultation towards retirement planning to, again, help you look at your specific situation and help you understand what you should be looking at as far as opportunities and personal strategies to capitalize on your individual retirement plan options. And if you have other options or a spouse's option, and again, helping put that financial puzzle piece together. Again, we're fiduciaries and we're independent. We don't sell products. We don't work for a national investment firm. We have no product bias. We give advice, okay? And we are paid on advice. We don't sell products or anything. There's nothing to sell, investments to sell. We don't do commission, okay? So as part of the program with the Iowa State Association of Counties is, again, a complimentary consultation, a complimentary conversation. Happy to have a conversation just to answer some basic questions, help you understand a little bit more about your situation. And if that leads to another conversation where you say, hey, I'd like some help doing a plan, help me understand what that looks like and how in depth that would be based on my particular situation, we're happy to do that. Your organization has already made agreement with us to provide a 50% discount on our average planning rate for doing planning for you folks too. Average takes about a couple of hours, so it'd be about a couple $100, but pretty minimal when we look at the amount of information, advice, and clarity that you get around your financial situation. So get happy to be a resource. Feel free to email me to set up a time for a phone call. Happy to be a resource. Okay. The next thing we'll be doing is doing I don't have the exact date at my fingertips, but in the future we'll be doing an estate planning education as well. Because again, we've just accumulated a bunch of assets to get into retirement, right? Well, now we really want to make sure that we're understanding some estate planning things too, to make sure your family's taken care of properly as well, and we're minimizing taxation and fees around estate planning. So, and also that's something too, that as life unfolds, our estate planning needs are different, right? When we're single and all alone, don't have much debt, well, that's pretty simple. We don't really need much of a plan. But as life gets more complicated, there are absolutely some helpful things that a lot of people are missing that aren't hard to do. We just need a little bit of education around them. So at this time, I'm happy to open up to any questions that anybody has. Happy to be a resource and walk through that. So I'll just kind of look at the chat. If anybody's going to plug something in a chat, or if you're able to unmute, you can. Or Molly, if you have any questions, we're happy to address any of those right now as well. I know we cover a lot of information in a short amount of time, and it probably didn't answer everybody's specific questions. And I know it's one of those things too that, when it comes to financial information and questions in a group, it's, sometimes people aren't as comfortable asking a question amongst a group because it's their individual personal financial situation. So certainly understand that. And again, happy to be a resource for any of your questions with a phone call or email or any way I could be of assistance. I'm happy to do so. And it looks like somebody had a question here about, can you expand on Roth conversion? So yeah, I'll jump into that a little bit here as well on Roth conversions. But in the meantime, feel free, if anybody else has questions to plug in, feel free to do so. But around Roth conversions, let's look back here at this graph. So Roth conversions, well, for one, there's a Roth conversion that could be on the front side. It's called a backdoor Roth conversion. That's on the front end when we look at, can we contribute to an individual IRA? Well, there's an income test for that. If we could contribute to an individual Roth account. And so if we're married, Roth IRA, married at about $204,000. If a married couple, or if you're single and you earn more than about $129,000, well, you can't contribute directly to a Roth. Or if you're married earning more than $204,000, you can't contribute directly to a Roth. So, but what you can do is what's called, for people that are high income earners, you can do what's called a backdoor Roth conversion. Again, the word conversion. That means that you need to contribute to a traditional IRA, but since the contribution to the IRA is not a deduction, okay, going in to it because we're over income, we could do a contribution to an IRA. Then you can do a conversion to a Roth IRA. And that's how high income earners get money in the Roth side of the world when their income's too high. So that's a backdoor Roth conversion. But as far as a Roth conversion in retirement, or now that or planning into retirement, or again, we're doing that for a lot of retirees right now, and or people whose income have dropped this year because maybe they're consulting on the way towards retirement. But if you look at, again, a married filing jointly situation, and you have somebody that's earning, their taxable income is $60,000, you can do a Roth conversion. That means taking money out of the 401k or IRA side of the world and paying taxes on it in your 12% bracket. It's creating a tax event to move money from the IRA to the Roth IRA, but we're doing it at a known 12% because at 12% taxes, that's not so bad. Also, you got to think about, a lot of times if we're in that 12% bracket, we may have been deferring putting money in to the 401k at maybe a 20% bracket or even higher. We may have been deferring income when had a higher income before retiring. We were deferring maybe 20 or 25%. Now fast forward to retirement, if we can keep our taxes in this scenario, our taxable income, because maybe we have a taxable brokerage account we can use, or Social Security or savings, or maybe an inheritance or something like that, we can keep our own taxable income at $60,000. Well, we have $23,000 that we can take out of the IRA, convert to Roth, and only pay 12% federal tax on that. Okay. So then again, that moves now to the Roth side of the world where it's tax-free, never to be taxed again. That just gives us that future flexibility as well for our future tax brackets when we have, again here, if you've got a spigot on two different buckets of money, fast forward to, hey, now we're in a tax year where as a married couple, we're at $80,000 taxable because we've, spent more and done whatever and enjoyed some retirement, but then we have a big expense on top of it for whatever reason, and we need another 20 grand. Well, anything above the 83,000 is going to get whacked at 22% taxes. If we have a Roth bucket or an HSA bucket, then we don't have, it's tax-free distribution. So we'll never go above that 12% bracket. So so that's the Roth conversion. And again, right now, our tax brackets are set, the current tax law is set where our tax brackets are going up in 2026, okay? Unless the government, keeps our taxes the same or lowers them, which I'm just not confident with all the spending that's been going on that would happen. So again, looking at Roth conversions specifically, and especially up until 2026, but then also up until what's called our RMD age, which right now the law is 72. Again, depending on our income brackets, a good thing to be looking at is doing Roth conversions up until 72. That's something we typically do towards the tail end of the year, because then kind of how your actual taxable income unfolded. So we look at that for our retirees at usually around November and December to do those conversions to hit in that particular tax year. So report your income tax for the Roth. Yes. Yep. So a Roth conversion is a taxable event. Correct. Yep. That was a clarification on that. I think I saw something on Social Security. Will we pay income tax on Social Security distributions? Yeah. Depending on our taxable income. And so when you can go out to ssa.gov and pull that, or you can email me and I can send you a link to the place where you need it too. But Social Security is taxable based upon our income. So right now, it can be taxed at 0 to 50% or 50% to 85%, or 85% is kind of the maximum, but it's based upon our taxable income. If our taxable income is more, as a married couple, is more than about $50,000, then it's taxed at about 85%. More than $35,000, it's taxed about 50%. If we keep our taxable income lower than that, then your Social Security is not taxed. But you can go out to ssa.gov and you can look at how is my Social Security tax, and it'll show you the calculations on that. But yeah, but Social Security is not counted as income. Okay, it's part of the equation, but it's part of our taxable income. So great question.
There's a question that says, can you break even on Social Security?
Break even meaning how much you've put in versus how much you get out. Yeah, you got to live a long time. So, but yeah, and that's actually kind of an interesting calculation to do. And then again, it's one of those too where it's an individualized calculation, but on a Social Security statement, it shows how much you've paid into Social Security, and then you can kind of see how long it takes to get that break even back. But yeah, I mean, if you live long enough, yeah. And again, part of it is the taxation side of it too, right? If you can control your income a little bit and minimize the taxation of it, for one is, you get, there's a break even for one on just the face value of your retirement benefit that you get versus what you paid in. But then also you got to also, if you want to take it to the next level, to truly make sure you're getting your break even, is to factor into what taxes, if your Social Security, depending on your particular taxable income, what, if any, your Social Security is being taxed. If it's getting taxed at, if you're paying taxes, if they're 50% tax or 85% of it's getting taxed, then obviously your break even is going to slide out a little bit further. So yeah, good question to consider. So, but again, yeah, happy to be a resource. Either questions now or questions in the future. The next month or 2 or 6 or whatever. As questions. That's the thing about our financial lives. Our financial lives, a lot of us, our financial lives were different 6 months ago and a year ago, right? And they'll be different 6 months from now and a year from now. There'll be different things and different questions that arise. But as questions, pop up, the number one thing that if I get urged today is just for people to ask, reach out for questions, reach out to, happy to be a resource myself, but also utilize your plan, your retirement plan, or your spouse, if you have one, their retirement plan. Yeah, if you're not sure on what you're investing in or what you own in those plans, or how to, be allocated properly, or how to utilize them, or how to do distributions, absolutely reach out to those folks. That's a good starting point. But there's so much more than just a retirement plan. Kind of like we covered today, there's so much more. When you if you pay to do your taxes, there's different tax professionals have different levels of knowledge, but if you're paying somebody, then I would absolutely be asking them questions, right? Get your money's worth from your tax advisor, and ask questions around, hey, what does it look like around Social Security, for taxation? If I was on Social Security, or in the next year, what that look like, or what would it look like for my particular taxes if I did a Roth conversion, right? Get your money's worth out of your tax advisor if you're paying to have somebody do your taxes. So again, ask questions. Big thing to make sure you do, because again, unless you do this for a living, nobody's expected to know all of the answers. We're just not. And I learn as I mature as well. There's things I know and there's things I don't. And when I'm humble enough to ask questions, it's a lot less stressful when you have clarity around the questions that we do have in our life, right? Whether it be financial or anything. So.
All right. Thank you for your time, Scott. We won't hold you any longer.
Yep. No worries. All right. Thanks, Molly. Good to thanks for having me on, and happy to share the information. Happy to be a resource in the future. And we'll see you in the future with the estate planning webinar.
We look forward to it.
All right. Very good. Thank you.